Broadcasting live on the UnitedWest.org AM radio network, simulcasting on DirecTV, iHeartRadio, Roku, and the World Wide Web. This is Enemies of the State with Tom Trento.
Yeah, Monday morning. Everybody's alive and well here in the studio.
USA.
The ladies, the That's girls. Right. Can we call them girls? Is that political?
Women.
Okay.
Women. Yes.
Women?
Yes.
Women.
All right, the women. The girls of USA winning the World Cup. Pretty cool. Amazing.
Yeah. Come on, boys. Where you at?
Absolutely amazing. I still don't know why they call it football. It's soccer. What is the big problem? Now that we win in America, could we change it back to soccer, or how's that work?
Yeah, we should.
We should.
Yeah.
Amazing, not just the game, amazing series. They played together as a very unified group of young ladies, though the oldest on the team is 40 years old. It's not that young.
That's why they're women, Tom.
And that's why they're women, yeah. And it was marvelous. This was the World War II World Cup.
Really
the U.S. defeated Germany last week and Japan yesterday. Little touch of history past. And thank you, ladies, for the excitement that we needed in this country. After President Obama delivers his 4th of July speech and forgets to mention God bless America, but no big deal.
No big deal.
What do we expect from all of that? You guys have a good weekend?
Yeah. I watched the fireworks for the first time in a long time. Went down there. Yeah, it was good.
Oh, yeah, you live by the water, don't you, Mark?
That's right.
Cool. Well, if I had a clock on that screen, and you know what, the monitor
weekend.
may not be on.
I read a good book this weekend.
If I had a clock on that screen, I would tell you it's about 8 minutes after 4 o'clock.
7 minutes after 4 o'clock.
7 minutes. You read a good book? Hold on to that. I want to hear that in a second.
I did.
7 minutes. I think that monitor's off right there. 7 minutes after 4 o'clock on the East Coast. You may be on the West Coast, you may be in Europe, you may be in Afghanistan, wherever you are watching the show. It's 8 minutes after the hour now, and we thank you for tuning in. We have a phenomenal show today, like we do every day, but more unique today. We have a special guest, and yeah, that's good. It's working now. And Damon, can you tell us a little bit about what we're going to be doing today on the show, Enemies of the State? Your host, Tom Trento, WSBR Radio out of Boca Raton, Florida, and Red State Talk Radio for you night owls, midnight East Coast time every single day. If you want to watch the show, we produce a television show. If you want to watch it, theunitedwest.org, teapartycommunity.com, and Breitbart TV, other places. Yeah, what's going on today's show, Damon?
We have an extremely special guest today, the author, playwright, or screenwriter, IDF veteran, Dan Gordon is going to be joining us. And we're going to talk about everything from Hamas to Iran wanting more missiles, their backing of terrorists. Particularly, we're going to deal with the tunnel issues in regards to Hamas and what is likely going to be the next war between Israel and the Hamas coming up in what we all think will be the very near future. We're probably going to get to another Clarion Project video, and we're going to go over some of an interview that Frank Gaffney of the Center for Security Policy did with Dan Gordon not too long ago and bring up some of those topics.
Oh, some of the ones that Frank covered. Yeah, Frank's a dear friend of ours. And, well, sounds like a good show. Should I go over to the Great Wall of the West to
Yeah, it's been a while.
Let's do it. I know.
Tom's wearing long pants today, everybody.
in
No shorts and flip-flops
That's right.
today.
No, I put long pants on. So we're in Florida. Give me a break at 10 minutes after the hour. I'm going to walk over to the Wall of the West and meet Captain Dan Gordon. And if I don't get too tied up here. Captain Dan, hey, how are you? Good to see you, sir.
How you doing?
You too.
Welcome to the show. I do have pants on. As you can see, here in Florida, we wear shorts and flip-flops. I stay behind the desk, but I put pants on for you. How about that?
Maybe more information that I needed, but thank you.
Well, we have a unique show where we do a little bit of edutainment. We deal with very, very serious issues on national security, on Israel, on Islamic threat, all of that. So we got to have a little bit of enjoyment to keep people from swallowing their revolvers. But one thing we like to do, because we have an uninterrupted hour, is get to know our subject matter experts. Let's take a moment. We know a little bit about you, but introduce yourself to our radio audience. We're going from Miami to Palm Beach, pretty big audience, and our internet audience that actually watches the show. Who is Dan Gordon, and what are you doing here today, sir?
By trade, I'm a screenwriter primarily. I've done, I guess, 15 Hollywood features, maybe 200 hours of television. Done such movies as The Hurricane with Denzel Washington, Wyatt Earp with Kevin Costner, The Assignment with Sir Ben Kingsley, Murder in the First with Kevin Bacon and Christian Slater. On television, I was the original executive producer and wrote the pilot for, and I think the first episodes of the series The Highlander. I was the head writer on Michael Landon's Highway to Heaven for pretty much, I think the show ran 113 episodes and I was on for 100. And of the first 100, I think I wrote 45 of those episodes and did the rewrites on the others. So on the one hand, I'm a Hollywood screenwriter. On the other, I was raised both in the United States and in Israel. I was born in the United States, but raised in both countries. When I was of military age, I lived in Israel, was drafted into the Israeli army in time to serve in the Yom Kippur War, which was 1973, and have very proudly worn the uniform of the IDF since then, which I hate to say is 42 years, but it's 42 years, and have been in 6 Middle East conflicts, most recently the last summer's war, Operation Defensive Edge, or Protective Edge, which was I referred to as the Israel-Hamas terrorist tunnel war. And as a result of those experiences, wound up writing a book called Day of the Dead, Book 1, Gaza, which will be the first of 2 books. The next will be Day of the Dead, Book 2, America, that had its genesis in my experiences in that war. It's a novel. And the conceit of the novel is that in the summer of 2014, ISIS finds that Hamas is broke, which Hamas was, and Hamas had dug, at Iran's behest in 2009, a series of terrorist tunnels, not only underneath the border with Israel, but at Iran's behest underneath the border between Tijuana and San Diego, so that Iran would have leverage against the United States if it ever tried to attack its nuclear facilities. And now the conceit of the novel is that in 2014, Hamas, being broke, decides to sell that network of terrorist tunnels that run between Tijuana and San Diego to ISIS, and that ISIS is going to use them to carry out the largest mass casualty terrorist attack in the history of the world.
All right, at how many minutes after the hour here are we?
14.
Clock's not on.
14.
14 minutes after the hour. Tom Trento, your host, Enemies of the State, name of the show. Our special guest, you just heard him introduce himself, Captain Dan Gordon, captain in the reserves of the IDF. Dan, as you were speaking, we had some B-roll, and you were in uniform with a gun in one hand, and I assume a pen in the other hand. Let's a couple of things. We're gonna walk through this so we get to know you a little bit. Our audience likes that when we get into the life of our guests, and then get into the issues at hand. But I got to tell you this. I'm glad you weren't in the room next to me when I finished reading Day of the Dead, or in the same room with me. It would not have been a pretty sight. I picked the book up in the morning. I didn't put it down till the evening. And then I go, where's the rest of it? Come on, come on, you know.
I wanted to reach out and grab him.
Talk
too.
about a cliffhanger. I mean, when is the next book coming out, Dan Gordon?
The next book will be out in about 6 months. I've already sold the movie rights to both books, and both of the books will form the movie. The movie will be called Day of the Dead, and it'll tell the complete story. And I've already written the screenplay for that. And we are now out, as they say in Hollywood, to A-list directors. Someone once likened trying to make a $50 to $100 million movie as trying to shoot an arrow through 6 moving hoops while you're drunk. and that's pretty much it. You've got to get an A-list director and an A-list star. They've both got to be available at the same time. And then you've got to make sure that you have theater dates available when you want to release the film, so that you're not up against Star Wars 9 or Fast and Furious 23 or whatever franchise of the month is out there that would kill you. So it's a daunting task on the movie front, but the next novel will be out within about 6 months.
All right, well, between you and me, Dan, nobody's listening. Nobody, send me the script for the second book, okay? I can't wait 6 months.
I'm sure it's real easy to get those A-list actors to do a pro-Israel movie.
Yeah, we had that question because
Yeah.
Mark read the book over the weekend, and we do a lot of work back and forth in Israel, and we know the anti-Semitism and the prejudices that exist. Even though the Jews run Hollywood, you know,
Right.
we were saying, is anybody going to make Day of the Dead Book 1 Gaza, you know,
Right.
which is really
No.
an illustration of the strength and vitality of Israel. What's the situation with that?
You know, when I came back from the war, I had written a number of articles about the terrorist attack tunnels, and my agent, who's one of the best agents in the world, said, "Listen, this is spectacular. All of a sudden, someone's lawn opens up in a little suburban community, and like zombies coming up out of their graves in Night of the Living Dead, you've got armed terrorists with RPGs, AK-47s, thousands of rounds of ammunition, hand grenades, tranquilizer shots, and plastic handcuffs because they mean to take women and children hostage and drag them back through the tunnels into Gaza." He said, "That's a great movie. That's a thriller. I've never seen anything like that. You've got to do that as a movie." And I said, "Jeff, you and I both know that no studio is going to make a movie in which Israeli soldiers are the good guys. It's just not going to happen. It's a waste of time. It has to be an American story." And he said, "Well, then make it an American story." And I said, "How do I make what happened on the border of Gaza and Israel an American story?" And he said, "Note, you are the writer, I am the agent. You write it, I will sell it." And
How do you find...
Wait, let him finish.
I began to think about that, and what I realized was that the country that was far more vulnerable to that type of terrorist tunnel attack was not Israel, because Israel was prepared for it. We had wonderful surveillance. We have our most elite combat units on the border with Israel. We have a 24-hour-a-day CAP, a combat air patrol, involving multiple air assets between drones, attack helicopters, F-15s, F-16s, you name it, we have it, and we have boots on the ground patrolling, 24/7. The United States has none of those things, and no one has to dig a tunnel between Tijuana and Mexico. They already exist. They're drug smuggling tunnels.
Right,
they just
right.
have to rent them for the day. And if you take a look at a town like San Diego, the low-hanging fruit is terrifying. You have half the Pacific Fleet at anchor in San Diego. You have one half the Naval Special Warfare Forces, or the Navy SEALs, at Coronado Island. The even-numbered teams are in Virginia, and the odd-numbered teams are in San Diego. Unbeknownst to most people, because of administration policy, it is forbidden for American military personnel to carry weapons on American military bases, which to an Israeli soldier is insane, because we are never allowed to be separated from our weapon, which is why a fat psychiatrist named Major Nidal was able to kill 13 people at Fort Hood with 2 handguns and wound 30-some-odd others. Because when you take a soldier's weapon away from him, he's no longer a soldier, he's a victim. So you kill 20 rent-a-cops or 20 shore patrol, and you own the base and can pretty much do whatever you want with it. And then imagine, 1,000 terrorists infiltrated through drug smuggling tunnels, hitting SeaWorld, or hitting a sports stadium where there are 18,000 people watching, pardon me, a basketball game. They can pretty much do what they want. And then if they do what Hamas intended to do, which was drag hostages, men and women and especially children, back through the tunnels into Mexico to execute them on YouTube, who's going to stop them? Is there any circumstance under which anyone can see this administration carrying out an airstrike in northern Mexico, or invading northern Mexico, or even the Mexican government controlling areas of northern Mexico which the cartels control? So to me, all of a sudden, I realized it actually was an American story. And the more I dug into it, the more research I did, the more people who I talked to in the intelligence communities, both of the United States and Israel, current and retired FBI, current and retired DEA, current and retired CIA, current and retired military special forces guys, I said, is there anything in this scenario that's going to make me look like a fool, that is science fiction? And I had two very high-ranking sources, one Israeli, one American. And the Israeli said to me, I'm going to choose my words very, very carefully. Everything in the scenario which you have created is correct as of today. And my jaw went on the ground. And the American military source, who was a 4-star Marine Corps general, just said, yup. And I said, by yup, you mean? He said, by yup, I mean yup. So the scenario is frighteningly realistic. And the more I delved into it, the more I came to the realization that as we speak, ISIS has got to be, it's not a question, does it want to carry out a mass casualty attack against the United States? ISIS has to carry out a mass casualty attack against the United States, because it's the caliphate. And Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi is the caliph. The caliph is in place of the Prophet Muhammad. After the Prophet Muhammad, the caliphs stand in his stead, much like the Pope in Catholicism. You can't be the caliph of the caliphate and not strike at the great Satan. It's like a heavyweight boxer who refuses to defend his title. So I guarantee you right now there are very smart ISIS staff officers presenting their various plans, and they're going through the same bureaucratic procedure of any military organization, and they're choosing which plan they want to put into pre-op phase, reconnaissance phase, and then which plan they finally okay. My strong suspicion is that the one that I've outlined is so tempting and so doable that it's the one they're going to choose. They're going to infiltrate 500 to 1,000 highly armed ISIS terrorists into a major city, either in California, Arizona, or Texas, all of which we've discovered tunnels running beneath, some of them with Middle East construction, by the way. And they very closely watched. They had a presence in Gaza during 2014. They very closely watched why the terrorist tunnel attacks failed against Israel, and they've drawn the conclusions about why they will succeed against the United States. And we're doing absolutely nothing to prevent it.
No, it's amazing what you're laying out, Captain Dan Gordon, reserved in the IDF. But as a career, you're a screenwriter and a playwright and an author. Tom Trento here, your host at, what time is it, Mark?
4:24.
4:24 in the afternoon on a beautiful 6th of July. Tomorrow's the deadline for the congressional imposed deadline for the negotiations in Vienna to conclude. We're going to talk to Dan Gordon about that in a moment. But we're discussing Day of the Dead, like zombies coming out of
really
the
is
grave
true.
to do zombie-like things. It's a central part of his book, Day of the Dead. You can get it at Amazon. Dan, before we leave, we want to give everybody a chance to find out how to reach you and how to get your book. We'll do that shortly. I know you can get it on Amazon. I think that's where I got it, delivered very, very quickly. Could not put it down. Now, we were very involved with Operation Protective Edge, doing a 10-part mini documentary on it as it was taking place. But regardless, it is such a thriller. But the point Dan is making is that the sensational components that are like, that can't happen, absolutely not only can happen, but you have to, and our planners, our operational planners have to believe that the scenarios that Dan Gordon's book lays out for Israel and the U.S. are on the drawing board of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, the caliph of the Islamic State's operational plan for attacking. It makes so much sense, which is frightening. Add to that, as he explains, and I think in one of your articles, Dan, you had to say, look, I'm not giving away any secrets. This is public knowledge if you just look at what's going on. But these bad guys that come across get in gigantic trucks like Tim McVeigh did, and they can create havoc in California. And then Dan lays out in his material what happens hour 1, hour 2, hour 3, the next day, the day after that. And folks, this is very for real information. Dan, how could our audience cycles in and out because they're driving their automobiles around? How does somebody get in touch with you, and how do they get your book?
The book is available on Amazon.com and on Barnes & Noble. I also did a Christian edition of the book, which means that there is less salty language or no salty language and less graphic descriptions of violence, and that's done in conjunction with Liberty University, which is the largest Christian university in the world, and they can get that by going to Day of the Dead Liberty Edition, all one word, Day of the Dead Liberty Edition.com, or they get the regular edition at Amazon or Barnes & Noble.
Very interesting. I happen to be an evangelical and very familiar with Falwell's operation and his son now at Liberty. Great school, great law school there, the whole thing. I didn't know you had Christian versions of stuff. I read the non-Christian version. Go with the non-Christian version, even if you're a Christian, all right? You're not going to die. Nothing's going to happen to you. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, there are no F-bombs in there, so...
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
I'd rather read the real one then.
Yeah. Read the real one. All right, Dan, let's go. Let's take a look now, because you have this unique capacity to write, as your life has indicated, but also the military side, and we're very concerned about the situation report right now in Israel. We go back and forth. We take people, Zionists, usually mostly Christians, but Jewish Zionists, to the hot spots. We were there in March. We went up to the Lebanese border, went over to the border in the Golan with Syria, Quneitra Pass, all of that. We go down to the Gaza border. We go over into East Jerusalem, down to the Rafah crossing. And look, Israel's, as you know, is surrounded by very bad people that want to hurt them. Let's take a walk around geographically. Give us your insight into the potential explosive situation by the bad actors, who they may be, and then how Israel needs to deal with all of this, and what the role of the United States is, and in particular, maybe not this administration, which we do not believe supports Israel the way it should, but the men and women in the United States, many of whom are evangelical Christians, who will stand with Israel. Let's go up to the Lebanese border up there, up in the north. Who are the bad people up there, and what are the concerns for Israel?
In the north, it's really clear-cut and simple. It's Hezbollah. Hezbollah is an Iranian puppet or an Iranian poodle, but they are more like an Iranian pit bull. Hezbollah has 100,000 rockets. That is an arsenal of rockets which is larger than all the NATO armies combined. And understand what I just now said.
That's amazing.
That's amazing.
In a geographical area that is...
We'll put the map up. Put a map up of northern Israel. We'll put it up in a second.
Yeah, in a border area that you can literally transverse in 45 minutes. That's how long it takes to drive from one end of the border to the other of Lebanon. Facing Israel are 100,000 rockets, more than all NATO countries combined. We have a wonderful missile interception system called Iron Dome, which has a spectacular interception rate of 90%, and which has saved my life personally on a number of occasions. But a 90% success rate against 100,000 rockets means that 10,000 rockets get through. And these are rockets which can strike Tel Aviv, they can strike Jerusalem, they can strike the industrial heart of Israel. If you can imagine 10,000 rockets hitting the greater Tel Aviv area, you're talking about destruction that hasn't been seen on planet Earth since the days of the Blitz of London. And people routinely, mistakenly say Gaza is the most densely populated area on Earth. In fact, the city of Tel Aviv is more densely populated than is the city of Gaza. Manhattan is more densely populated. 10,000 rockets hitting the greater Tel Aviv area is a very nasty piece of business. In addition, we know that Hezbollah must have a network of tunnels similar to what Hamas had under our border with Gaza. They must have a similar network that runs underneath the border of northern Israel. We know that Nasrallah has said that he can infiltrate 5,000 to 10,000 Hezbollah fighters who are good fighters. They are well-trained, highly disciplined. They now have wonderful combat experience, having been in Syria for the last 2 years, propping up the Assad regime. And if you can imagine 5,000 to 10,000 of them instantly coming across that border, which has a lot of civilian communities, Nasrallah has said, I can conquer northern Galilee, and we will take men, women, and children hostages. What people forget is that in the 2006 Second Lebanon War, which started with Hezbollah ambushing Israeli military forces and kidnapping 2 Israeli, now it turns out they were dead, reserve soldiers. At the same time that they did that, they opened up with a Katyusha barrage against the civilian communities, pardon me, and they attempted to attack a civilian community called Avivim and take hostages there. Their intent is to take civilian men, women, and children hostages. So we face a very daunting task just on our northern border with a very determined Islamo-fascistic vital enemy that is better equipped in terms of rocketry than any NATO nation on Earth. That's just on our Lebanese border. The footage that you're showing right now, is of the first terrorist tunnel attack from Gaza into Israel. It took place in a wheat field very much like the one that I'm explaining about right there. 2 things happened. They came up in a wheat field that was supposed to be full of wheat. It had been harvested 2 days before, so the camouflage was gone. They were instantly spotted by Israeli surveillance, which surveils that area 24 hours a day. And as you can see, an aerial asset engaged them almost instantly with a Hellfire missile and allowed at least 6 of the dozen terrorists to find out if the 72 Virgin thing is real or not.
All right, so we have up north 100,000 missiles. The footage we showed was the Gaza tunnel, and a very unique story you told in Day of the Dead, Book 1, Gaza. A miraculous story that's true. That's actually true. We had read about that. Now, you're 40 years plus with the IDF. Netanyahu calls you in and says, Dan, you're writing all these movies and everything, but what do we do if the Hezbollah starts firing off all these missiles, and if we fire back and try to defeat them, they're going to hold up burn little babies, and the UN is going to have a worldwide protest. I mean, what do we do, Dan? How do we defeat 100,000 missiles?
Well, there's a couple things. Three things. Number one, BB isn't calling me in so soon. Number two, just by word of explanation, anybody who has as much gray hair as I have and is still a captain, one would have to think is a blithering idiot, because the captain is not exactly an illustrious rank. I was actually a sergeant. For the majority of my reserve career, I was given a battlefield commission to captain in the 2006-7 Lebanon War. So the reason at this advanced stage that I'm still a captain is I was really a sergeant for 30 plus years, and I was one of those guys who, the captains tell the sergeants and the sergeants run the army.
Right.
So that's number two. Number three, we've already said, we realize that Hezbollah is an extension of Iranian power. Hezbollah, despite what its lies have been to the Lebanese people, is not the protector of Lebanon. The Lebanese people now realize that, because they see Hezbollah endangering Lebanon by being involved in the Syrian civil war at the behest of Iran for the past 2 years. They are an extension of Iranian military might. Hezbollah is not going to break wind unless the Ayatollah tells them to do so. So it's a question of, when does Iran want Hezbollah to attack Israel? We've already said that if we face 100,000 rockets, if we face a ground invasion into northern Galilee from southern Lebanon, the rules of engagement are going to be different this time, and there's not going to be a southern Lebanon when it's over. And the world can do with that whatever the hell the world wants to do with that, quite frankly. The forces of Hezbollah have what they call the dead baby strategy. They try, like Hamas, to maximize their own civilian casualties so that they can wear the mantle of victimhood while they carry out terrorist attacks. We've simply said that if it comes to a war of national survival, which it well may come to, the gloves are not going to be on, the gloves are going to be off. And if the Lebanese people permit their country to be turned into an Iranian base for operations against Israel, they have to be prepared for the consequences of that.
All right, that's up north, folks. Tom Trento with our special guest, Dan Gordon. And Dan we're working through the, not just existential, but the immediate threats that Israel faces while we're here celebrating 4th of July, all of that. There's very serious problems in the Middle East, centered in Israel, with surrounding neighbors that impact every single American. That's the point we try to make all the time, that this isn't over there, this is here. That's further evidenced as we go to the east now, look at the Syrian border where the Islamic State, and Dan, we personally here stopped calling it ISIS, as it's progressed from ISIS to ISIL to the Islamic State. They are Islamic, they are a state that's being recognized internally by people. And we like the term Daesh, too. We like to refer to them as Daesh, which the French do now also. But help us unravel the puzzle, or put into some sort of recognizable formation the puzzle pieces in Syria. Who are the bad guys? Who are the good guys? And what is Israel doing as this whole mess takes place?
Syria, as a state, in effect, no longer exists. Assad is sort of pulling everything into a kind of Alawite redoubt with Latakia, which is a port on the Mediterranean, as a last stronghold. The Russians are very supportive of that because Latakia is their warm water port. But Syria as an effective state no longer exists. Assad doesn't control 2/3 of his own country. The remaining 2/3 is divided, and Assad's forces, by the way, don't exist to the extent that they used to. What really is holding him up are Hezbollah fighters and Al-Quds force from Iran with what's left of the Syrian army. And this is despite the fact that he's using chemical weapons, he's dropping barrel bombs, he's committing every war crime known to man. He has not managed to stop the caliphate juggernaut. Opposing him are a variety of Islamo-fascist, fanatical groups, the largest of which, of course, is the caliphate. In addition to the caliphate is Jubhat al-Nusra, which is the al-Nusra Front. You have Al-Qaeda having elements there. The laughable strategy of the United States that we will somehow take quote-unquote moderate Syrian rebels and will train them for a year in Saudi Arabia and equip them and then send them back into the fight is absolutely ludicrous. ISIS left Syria to go into Iraq a year ago in a nice convoy of Toyota pickup trucks when they had less than 1,000 fighters, and we could have taken ISIS out with 3 F-15s in 20 minutes. Today they have somewhere around 50,000 fighters, and they are the richest terrorist entity in the history of the world. They have literally billions, and that's billions with an S, which they get both from having been highly successful bank robbers. They robbed every bank in every area they've taken over. They've taken over the oil wells in every area they've taken over, and they sell every day on the black market through Turkey, black market oil at several million a day. They sell antiquities on the black market, not just destroy them for propaganda videos. And they have a highly successful kidnapping video, and in that sense you can look at the beheading videos really as a marketing tool, because they have foreign oil executives, various foreign nationals who they've kidnapped, and every day they are ransoming those people off for millions of dollars. Kidnapping is a growth industry for them. So in Syria you have this variety of Islamo-fascist, imperialistic, admittedly genocidal, homophobic, misogynistic organizations who are fighting for dominance. They threaten not only Syria, they threaten not only what we laughingly call Iraq, but now they threaten one of America's oldest, strongest, most reliable allies, and that is the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. Today, I can tell you that the guarantor of Jordan's not only independence but existence is not the United States, is the Israel Defense Forces.
Yeah, many people aren't aware of that. There's about 4 or 5 million people, I think, in Jordan, and the demographic is split from folks who are Salafists, the Muslim Brotherhood, who hate the king, to almost 1 million refugees out of Syria. It's a very fractured country, and the IDF is holding it up because when we go and take our folks along the geography of the eastern coast, you stand there at the Galilee and you look right across the thing and you go, what is that? Or the Jordan River. What is that? That's Jordan over there. You know, they're friendly right now, but that may not always be the case. So what is Israel doing when it looks out from the Golan and, 8, 10, 12 kilometers away, the Islamic State is there engaging?
We're preparing. We realize that the situation in Syria can't go on forever the way it is right now. Eventually there'll be someone who is dominant. If that entity which is dominant is either the Caliphate or Al-Qaeda or Jubhat al-Nusra, they've all announced that their intention is that after they finish off Assad, their target is Israel. And so Israel is preparing on the Golan Heights to engage whatever enemies threaten our country in an area that had been peaceful for over 40 years. The other thing that we're doing is providing aid to the Druze minority, which are suffering during that conflict. The reason we're doing that, as opposed to helping, let us say, the Christian minority, is the Druze are right there on our border. We can actually easily and effectively give them medical aid. We can even ensure that they are not slaughtered, which we've announced that we will do. Obviously, the Jewish people have our dance card has already been punched when it comes to genocide, and that's sort of a soft spot. And when we see that happening to another minority in the Middle East, we tend to be very sympathetic towards that. We also have a very large and loyal and wonderful Druze population within our own country who serve in the Israeli military, who are full citizens, as are all the citizens of Israel, Arab, Muslim, Christian, Jewish, Druze, what have you, Cherkessi. And we are doing all that we can to help the Druze make it through the horror of the Syrian civil war. But we're also preparing for the day after that war, when we know that we will face a hostile entity, which is why two things that are important to point out. Number one, for anyone who says to us, well, the key to Middle East peace is you reaching an accord with the Palestinians, and don't worry about your security needs. You can evacuate the West Bank completely, and most importantly, the Jordan Rift Valley, which is our border with Jordan, because we will put up international forces who will guarantee your security. Well, the international forces that were supposed to guarantee Israel's security ran to the Israelis for protection against the Islamofascists who were bent on incinerating them. They all left their posts. They all ran into Israel. And as opposed to the international forces protecting Israel, Israel protected the international forces. So to those who would suggest such a solution on the West Bank, I would say take a look at what happened at the Quneitra boarding crossing, and you will see how impractical that is. To those who would tell us we don't need a military presence in the Jordan Rift Valley, which is our natural barrier between Jordan and us, if Jordan falls, if King Abdullah and his government are overtaken by Islamist forces, that is our last line of defense between us and the caliphate. And finally, to those who would say, oh, honestly, really, you're being overly dramatic, just give it back to the Palestinians. Come on, it's their land. I would say you have a short memory, because in 2005, we did exactly what those folks have encouraged us to do on the West Bank. We deployed our own army against 10,000 people, and we pulled them out of their farms, out of their places of business, out of their houses of worship. And those were not Palestinians, those were Israeli Jews. Had we done it to Palestinians, we'd have been hauled before the World Court as war criminals. Exactly. We uprooted all of our Israeli Jewish settlers who were in Gaza, pulled them out of the settlements, and handed over to the Palestine Authority, without a single caveat, all of Gaza, in the naive hope of giving peace a chance, that Gaza could become the Singapore of the Middle East, which it could have had their intentions been peaceful. Instead, what happened was that in very short order, Hamas, which is not the duly elected representative of the Palestinian people, Hamas came to power in Gaza by staging one of the most bloodthirsty coups there's ever been, literally killing hundreds of their fellow Palestinians who were from Fatah, lining them up against walls, machine gunning them. You can still see the footage on YouTube, blindfolding them, pushing them off the top of multi-story buildings, shooting their kneecaps off, and that's how Hamas came to power. So what we got wasn't land for peace. What we got was land for Hamas. 12,000 rockets fired us, and terrorist tunnel attacks. We're not going to make that same mistake again.
No.
We're stupid, but we're not crazy.
Hey, Dan, now hang on. We didn't plan on this, but we're going to have to do to you what you did to your readers in book 1 and have a cliffhanger. We have so much to go over with you. We're only in the northeast corner coming down along Jordan. We got to deal with Iran. We got to go down to the Sinai. We've got a lot of work to do. Part 2, book 2, in the near future. But Mark has a question.
You're right.
We only got a couple of minutes left. Then I want you to weigh in on the decision with the negotiators in Vienna. We'll have you back in about a week after we get some clarity on the Iranian situation, because that is very significant, and that's what's going to trigger, we believe, the Hezbollah coming down. Mark, you had a question?
Right. I want to get back to the tunnels over in the United States. I mean, these tunnels that we're talking about, they're not like the Great Escape type of tunnels with, in the movie The Great Escape. These are actually really reinforced big tunnels with railroads and arches and equipment and everything like that. And we've discovered a bunch of them on our U.S. border, not as complex as the Israeli tunnels over into from Gaza to Israel, but we have found tunnels such as this right on our border, and they're pretty complex enough for a grown man with lighting and everything can walk through. How many of these types of tunnels? I've heard the State Department, the ICE, say there was 137. How many tunnels do you know of that exist, in America going over to Mexico?
I've heard the same number, but to quote Donald Rumsfeld, there are the things that we know, and there are the things that we know that we don't know, and there are the things that we don't know that we don't know. So how many tunnels? One doesn't know. Some of the tunnels that have been found, however, bear all the marks of Middle East construction, and as you pointed out, they are not Great Escape, dug out with a spoon and a tin can. They're reinforced concrete. They have electricity, phone lines, air conditionings, even railroad tracks, and they are the type of tunnels through which you could infiltrate literally 500 to 1,000 armed terrorists with great ease. And what's most frightening is usually those tunnels come up in industrial warehouses where people are used to seeing trucks go in and out. So you say, oh, well, how are these guys going to get into, downtown San Diego or El Paso or Tucson? People are going to see them, come up out of the ground and we'll stop them. No, they'll get into vans and they'll go to their attack points. If you look at what ISIS did in Ramadi and Mosul, and most recently in the Sinai, you can see what their playbook is. They start off by detonating half dozen to a dozen truck bombs, which are the same kind that McVeigh used at the Oklahoma City bombing, the same kind that took out the Marines in '82 in Beirut, the same kind that took out the Khobar towers. It's a ammonia nitrate diesel fuel bomb, fertilizer and diesel fuel, very easy to make. Yep. They set off half dozen to a dozen of these. Each one of these truck bombs kills around 200 people, wounds around 300. So you do the math. You set off 10 of those, you've killed 2,000 people. Now you've got a choice to make. You can set off secondary explosions timed to take out the first responders when they reach those bomb sites. So when the cops and the fire department show up at the scenes of those bombings, you set off the secondary explosions and take them out. Or you can choose that point in time to launch your ground forces on the opposite side of town while the first responders are dealing with those explosions. And then you've done reconnaissance that shows you what the route is that the reinforcements will take to get to where your ground forces are attacking. And you've pre-planted IEDs along those routes so that when the cavalry comes to the rescue, you've got one guy with a cell phone, sets off the IED. Their doctrine is take out the opposing forces before you ever make contact with them. It's a very good military doctrine. They're very good at it. It's particularly suitable to an American city. If you can imagine that scenario, in El Paso, in Tucson, in San Diego, in LA, in Phoenix, Scottsdale. Who's going to stop them? San Diego PD? The California National Guard, which will take 2 days to mobilize? There's a Posse Comitatus Act in the United States which prohibits federal troops from operating absent a presidential order. Let's say the president actually gives the order in the best of circumstances. And let's say it's San Diego, and you say, well, we've got the Marines at Camp Pendleton. The Marines are a wonderful fighting force. They are. In the best of circumstances, it will take you to get that order transmitted, to get a unit locked, loaded, in their vehicles, in their helicopters, ready to move, at least a couple of hours. In the best of all circumstances, in 2 hours, the ISIS terrorists will be done.
Yep. No, this is frightening, as your book Day of the Dead is. Book 1, Gaza. Book 2 sounds like it's going to be in Southern California. And here's where fact and fiction are so intertwined that this is actually something all of us here in the United States ought to be concerned about. And we're seeing this being played out in the Middle East, with Israel in particular, which is why we need to continually stand with Israel. Dan, we've played this scenario out many times, if then, and we're of the belief, we here at the United West, and many of our friends, our conservative friends, believe that if something were like this catastrophic attack were to occur, the response would not be, as George Bush said, okay, we're going to go kill the enemy. It would be the opposite. It would be this president, this administration, Obama, calibrating down, and then from the Democrat Party, and a survey just came out the other day showing the Democrat Party has abandoned Israel essentially and joined with the Palestinians, would be to blame Israel for causing this in the United States. And if we got out of Israel and the Middle East, like getting out of Gush Katif was supposed to be the answer for Gaza, if we pulled all our troops out from the Middle East, then there'd be peace in the Middle East. And the left in this country sadly believes that Israel's always the bully in the neighborhood. That's why we have our organization, the United West, and do these shows to counter that sort of religious, ridiculous thinking. Dan, quickly, we've got about a minute left. And we will have you back because this is just too serious, too important. Your quick thoughts on the negotiations in Vienna and the deal that's going to come out for the West, how it's going to affect the West.
Yeah, you've got two entities in the Middle East right now that are both Islamo-fascist and imperialistic and bent on world domination. One is called the Caliphate and the other is called Iran. The administration has admitted that it has no strategy to deal with ISIS or the Caliphate, and it is about to ensure that Iran becomes a nuclear power at the latest within 10 years. What one doesn't understand is that when you appease one Islamo-fascist in the hope that he will then take care of the other Islamo-fascists, which seems to be the administration's thinking. If we appease Iran, allow them nukes, they'll take out ISIS for us and we can retreat from the Middle East. In effect, when you appease one Islamo-fascist, you encourage them both and you discourage all of your allies. If you think of what happened in World War II, the right thought that Hitler could be a bulwark against Bolshevism, and the left said that Comrade Stalin would take care of Hitler for us. And what we realized was one of those dictators was just as bad as the other. We paid for it with 40 years of warfare after World War II, and had we acted in the 30s to prevent Hitler from expanding, we would also have prevented Stalin from expanding. Wow. We haven't learned that lesson.
All right. On that note, Book 2, the continuation with Dan Gordon on going around Israel, going down to the south, taking a look into Egypt, into the Sinai, into Saudi Arabia, which is completely going, what's going on here, folks? Down into Yemen, where we have proxy battles. Dan, we will have you back. You're doing the Lord's work. We appreciate everything you're doing. You take care now. And once again, folks, Day of the Dead. What am I doing here?
Front screen. We switch cameras.
Oh, right
on.
here. Okay. Day of the Dead, book 1, Dan Gordon's book. Please get it and read it. It is a thriller, but a realistic thriller and one that wakes up people. You can get it at Amazon, Day of the Dead. Dan, take care. We got to go. Everybody, we'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Bye.